Podcast title: The Boardroom Blueprint. Tagline: Insights into corporate governance, board leadership, and ethical business strategy. Episode focus: Governance of strategy, where boards add insight, not execution. Oversight without overreach. Welcome to the Boardroom Blueprint, your insight into corporate governance, board leadership, and ethical business strategy. I'm your host, Sri Ram, your guide to better governance. Today, we explore one of the most misunderstood responsibilities of a board, the governance of strategy. Boards do not run the business. Management does. Yet boards are accountable for the long-term direction of the organization. This is the governance paradox. How do boards shape strategy without executing it? How do they add insight without overreach? Independent directors operate precisely at this intersection. Let us begin with a critical distinction. Shaping strategy is not the same as approving strategy. In many boardrooms, strategy is presented as a finished product, slides prepared, forecasts built, assumptions embedded. Directors are asked to review, question briefly, and approve. But effective governance begins much earlier. Boards should engage in strategic dialogue before strategy crystallizes. They should test themes, stress long-term positioning, and explore competitive shifts. Independent directors add value by bringing external perspective, industry comparisons, cross-sector insight, macroeconomic awareness, and stakeholder expectations. Their contribution is not to design the plan, it is to elevate its quality. Challenging assumptions is central to this role. Every strategy rests on assumptions: growth rates, capital costs, regulatory stability, customer behavior, technological change. If those assumptions are fragile, the strategy is fragile. Independent directors must ask, what must be true for this strategy to succeed? Where are we most exposed? What would invalidate our core thesis? What are competitors likely to do in response? Blind spots are rarely obvious to management teams deeply immersed in operations. This is where independent directors act as constructive disruptors. Not antagonists, not skeptics for the sake of skepticism, but disciplined challengers of consensus. Groupthink in strategic discussions is particularly dangerous. If all executives agree quickly, the board should become more curious, not less. Healthy strategy debates involve tension around risk appetite, capital allocation, and trade-offs. Independent directors should watch for warning signs: overly optimistic projections, limited downside scenarios, compressed timelines, unclear links between strategy and capability, absence of dissent within management. These are signals that debate may be insufficient. Another essential dimension is risk strategy alignment. Strategy defines ambition, risk appetite defines tolerance. If these are misaligned, governance failure follows. Boards must ensure that strategic objectives are achievable within the organization's risk capacity: financial, operational, reputational, and regulatory. Independent directors should ask, do we have the talent to execute this? Is our balance sheet resilient under stress? Are compliance and control functions prepared for this expansion? Have we stress-tested downside cases? Strategy without risk discipline is speculation. Equally, risk management without strategic clarity is paralysis. Governance requires alignment. One of the most concerning patterns in boardrooms is silent approval. Directors may feel pressure to support strategy publicly, even when privately uncertain. Time constraints may compress debate. Complexity may overwhelm non-executive members. But approving a strategy that directors do not fully understand is a serious governance lapse. Independent directors must insist on clarity. If the strategy cannot be explained succinctly, it is unlikely to be coherent. If financial implications are opaque, capital allocation risk increases. If operational implications are unclear, execution risk escalates. Asking for additional information is not obstruction, it is stewardship. There is also a boundary to respect. Boards should not rewrite business plans. They should not design marketing tactics. They should not dictate product roadmaps. That is management's domain. Oversight without overreach requires discipline. The board defines expectations, challenges assumptions, ensures alignment, and ultimately decides whether the proposed path is consistent with long-term value creation. Execution remains with management. Independent directors must remain conscious of this boundary. Strategic governance also requires time. If strategy discussions are confined to one annual offsite, depth suffers. Ongoing strategic checkpoints allow boards to adjust course as external conditions evolve. Markets shift, regulation evolves, technology disrupts. Boards must periodically revisit strategic assumptions, not to interfere, but to ensure continued relevance. Finally, strategy governance is about courage. Sometimes the board must ask whether the current strategy is no longer viable. Sometimes it must question legacy businesses, historical strengths, or leadership assumptions. These conversations are uncomfortable, but avoiding them is more costly. Independent directors bring a degree of distance that enables objectivity. They are less tied to legacy decisions and more focused on long-term sustainability. That distance is an asset, if used responsibly. Governance of strategy is not about execution detail. It is about insight, challenge, alignment, and clarity. Boards add value when they sharpen thinking, not when they substitute management. Oversight without overreach. That is the discipline. Because in the end, strategy defines the organization's future, and governance ensures that future is chosen deliberately, not drifted into. Thank you for listening to the Boardroom Blueprint. Lead with integrity and govern with purpose.